Hey guys, Matt with Slice here. I wanted to just do a brief video as can be possible on the disassembly, installation, and reassembly of a fuse with the Timascus components that we're going to be selling on the website. So I'm going to be offering a Timascus pocket clip, Timascus backspacer, as well as Timascus studs. These will work on both the liner lock and the frame lock variants, and we will also be offering some titanium micarta inlaid studs as well, both in green as well as black, to go with the two liner lock variants that we offered. Couple things that I have out just that I'm going to be using to assemble and disassemble. I've got this wonderful pair of pliers actually that were recommended to me by Brian Brown of Brian Brown Knives. And these are great because they will help in not marring up the titanium on your thumb studs. Now, it's going to scuff the finish. It's a blasted finish, so it's a little sensitive as it is. But these are good because they will not, like I said, just tear up the titanium itself. They could be reblasted or refinished if you could get somebody to do that for you. If you have no intention of reusing these or anything like that, some good old-fashioned pliers around the house will work, but like I said, those are going to mess up the studs themselves. So as long as you don't care about that, regular pliers are fine. If you'd like to try and preserve them, these are the ones that I'd recommend. These will be linked in the listing, so you guys can purchase these if you wish. Once again, not necessary, but definitely would recommend. In addition, I've got 2 bit drivers. And then these are the Torx bits that I am using. I'll link these in the description as well, just for anybody that's being really, really particular. Jonas actually did a video on this with disassembly and everything, and on his, with the bits he was using, the pivot was a T8. For some reason, with the bits that I am using, the T9 fits this pivot screw just absolutely perfect. It is so snug in there, it's unbelievable. So this is what I'd recommend. If you have not disassembled your fuse yet, we have had some people reach out to us just letting us know that there were pretty extreme amounts of Loctite on these pivots. And when I was disassembling some of the knives that I was installing Timascus kits on last week that we sold, I did come across 4 of them out of 15 that were they had a lot of Loctite on them, guys. And so I'd recommend a heat gun or hairdryer method just to get this this pivot warm enough to loosen up and release that Loctite so you can unscrew the knife. So yeah, I have 2 bit drivers out because for some of you guys, if you notice that your pivots start to turn, you have Torx screws on both sides, so you'll be able to put a driver on one side and a driver on the other and turn them in opposite directions so that you, or at least turn one while fixing the other one so that you can get one of them to stop rotating as you try to disassemble the knife. So with that, I'm going to start breaking this guy down for you, and we'll just walk you through it, and we'll go from there. So start with the knife in the open position. If y'all notice the camera shaking is because I'm bumping it with my hand. I've got it on a mount, but I'm having to work around it. I'm moving my Timascus parts out of the way here so I don't scratch those up. And then I'm going to start by loosening the show side. I'm trying to keep this in the... Come on, focus for me. There we go. All right. Going to loosen both of these scale screws here. Pull those out. Once again, guys, I'm just setting everything over here to the side. As you disassemble this knife, please put your parts in a little plastic bin or a cup or something so they do not get lost, because we are going to be charging if you lose these parts and need them replaced. And we don't have a ton of them. I do not want to have to replace these things for you guys, so just please be very careful when you're disassembling these things. All right, so when you're doing your pivot, if you have one that you're just noticing has extreme amounts of Loctite, it's not budging on you, please be very careful. Apply a lot. Make sure you have fresh bits like I'm recommending. Apply a lot of pressure once it's actually seated in there and while you're applying the pressure, then turn it. You do not want this thing to slip on you because you're going to scratch your pivot, guys, and we're not going to replace them, and Jonas nor myself will be reblasting them for you, so you'll have to find somebody that can do that for you. So I'm warning you now. Please be very careful when you're disassembling these things as to try to not to scratch them. So I've taken off my 2 screws. I've taken off my pivot screw. I'm going to wiggle the show side scale out of place here and set it off to the side. Next, I'm going to loosen and remove, well, I'm going to at least loosen my 2 BACKSPACER screws here. All right, those are loose. Remember that your stop pin is seated up here, and if you're having some trouble removing the show side liner, that is probably why. So you'll have to wiggle it back and forth, and eventually it's going to come off. 2 screws are still sitting inside the liner here, so I'm actually going to leave mine in there, and you can remove them if you want and put them in whatever plastic bin it is that you're using to keep track of your parts if you're being a good boy. But, all right. While I've got the BACKSPACER, so this is what it's going to look like when you disassemble the knife. The BACKSPACER has a pin in it here, which is going to stay in the titanium spacer. When I originally got these kits in, I did try to transfer this pin over to the Timascus spacer, and it does not fit. So we're just recommending that you just not reuse it. Leave it in there, forget it's there, take the titanium spacer, discard it, keep it safe, whatever you want to do with it. All of Jonas's customs are held with the BACKSPACER in place by 2 screws. And so Jonas felt more than comfortable saying, hey, the 2 screws will be just fine. So disregard or just keep that pin that's in the titanium spacer there. You don't need it, guys. Once again, don't need the pin in the spacer. So we're done with that. While the knife is still disassembled like this, we're going to go ahead and loosen and remove our pocket clip. I'm going to leave my knife facing the same way that it is, and I'm just going to turn those screws until the pocket clip actually comes off. Something I did not mention earlier that I want to go ahead and point out to you guys so y'all can be aware of it too. Speaking of like lost parts and stuff, I'm going to go ahead and pop my screws out so I can show it to you. I should have mentioned it when I took it off. On each side of the blade, there is both a bearing as well as a thrust washer here. Mine is being held in place because this knife's been disassembled multiple times, so there's some additional pivot lube in there. The pivot lube is what's actually holding that washer in place right now. But when you're disassembling yours, make sure you keep track of that washer. Put it in your parts bin. Make sure you reassemble the knife with it in there. We will touch on that when we put it back together. But if your bearings come out, make sure that the races are with the open section facing away from the blade, like you see here. And let's see if I can pick it up. So you can see that would be considered the closed side of the race. So the closed side always goes against the blade there, like so. You can see the stop pin sitting right there as well. So just wanted to mention, thrust washer right there, don't lose it, because I don't want to have to replace it for you once again. We've already removed the pocket clip, so we're done with that guy as well. Having disassembled and reassembled 15 frame locks last week, this was the method by which I found was preferred for me to have to put the pocket clip on. So I'm going to leave my screws in here, get that guy to thread back through, and I'm actually going to set the pocket clip down with the nice side of the outside of the clip facing out. I'm going to line up one of my screws with the holes, and I'm just going to get a couple of threads going and then get the threads going on the other one, and so that way it'll pick it up like that, and you don't have to fumble around with trying to get that pocket clip seated with 2 hands and juggling the knife and all that fun stuff. You should be able to leave your blade on the knife exactly as you see it. So I'm going to snug those down nice and firm. Our Timascus BACKSPACER here, as you can see, no pin. I'm just going to kind of position it where I need it to be. I'm going to bring back my show side titanium liner. I'm going to get my 2 BACKSPACER screws, put those back through here. All right. I'm going to line those up with the 2 holes that are found on the BACKSPACER itself. And then before I press down on this side, I'm going to make sure that I have my my stop pin properly seated. If it is not properly seated when you go to put this knife back together, guys, your blade's not going to line up. You heard that audible snap just there. So you can see how everything here is nice and spaced out correctly. If you find that you have more of a gap between this side of the blade and the show side liner, or between the blade and the lock side liner, that means your stop pin is probably misaligned and you need to get that lined up before you start cinching everything down, or you're gonna put it in a bind, you'll have to disassemble it all again. So just make sure that you got it all nice and tight, and you should hear an audible click when everything kind of seats into place. So once we do that, going to get my backspacer screws here started. Once again, I'm just kind of constantly making sure that everything is lined up correctly as it should be. All right, I'm gonna cinch down the outside one first, like so. Make sure everything is still spaced out correctly, which it is. I'm gonna bring back my show side scale here. Get those threads started before I bring on the bit driver. I'm gonna go ahead and drop my 2 show side scale screws into place. Just gonna go ahead and get those screwed in. And then we can get our pivot done. All right, so I'm gonna tighten up this pivot again. Make sure it's nice and tight. Whenever I go to close a knife for the first time after I disassembled it, I always just want to drop it nice and slow so that I make sure that my blade is not going to contact my liner. There we go. All right. So as you can see, Timascus spacer, Timascus pocket clip. If you don't plan on disassembling your knife again anytime soon, I'd recommend while you're at it, just go ahead and putting you a little bitty dab of Loctite. I'm talking like put it on the tip of a toothpick and just put it on the threads before you take the knife apart. So, all right. Then we're gonna get our nice pliers here. Once again, guys, if you're not interested in salvaging these, then you are more than welcome to just use a regular pair of pliers you have around the house. But I'm gonna take these, something I wanna add as well. Jonas mentioned this in his video that he posted to his Facebook group. I didn't have any painter's tape around the shop today, and I want to get this video done, and so this is just for demonstration purposes. He recommended that you take a piece of painter's tape, which is an excellent idea, and you can actually set it on top. This is just some clear shipping tape, just for demonstration. So he said, set it on top of your blade here, and then with the painter's tape, because it's it's not like this kind of stuff, you can actually just press down and it'll pop the stud through the tape. And so that way you run a lower risk of scratching your blade, because remember guys, if you scratch the knife while you're installing the stuff, we will not spot it for you. So you're supposed to have some blue painter's tape or some kind of masking tape of some sort across your blade here so that you won't scratch your flats. If you think you are able and willing enough to not scratch your blade, you can forego that step. You're gonna gently put some pressure on the stud here, and then we're just gonna gently rotate that. Some of these do have a decent amount of Loctite on them as well, so it may take more than a couple of turns with these guys to get it going, but once you have that done, all you have to do, unscrew that, wiggle this guy out. These things do seat firmly in there. That little guy there does seat firmly into the holes of the blade. So if the threaded stud is sticking, that is why. And you may need to take the pliers to the other side and just give it a gentle rotation to get it to come loose. So I'm gonna take, once again, this is how I assemble it. Do it your way you want. I put the threaded end through on the left side here with the blade facing away from me. I can see my threads now sticking out through the other side here. I would, if this were final assembly, I would be putting a little bitty dab of Loctite on these as well. The studs are more likely to come loose in my opinion than the pivot is, or at least that's been my experience with my customs. So I would take, once again, toothpick, very, very small amount of Loctite, and I would just actually, I'm gonna put it on the inside of these threads. I'm just gonna gently place it in there. And so, once again, it doesn't take much, guys. Very little bit of Loctite. So once again, I'm gonna just thread this on. I'm gonna turn them in opposite directions and then just twist it as hard as I can so that way they are installed. So there you have it, guys. That's your Timascus pocket clip, your Timascus backspacer, and your Timascus thumb studs all installed on the JIKnives fuse. So remember, keep track of your parts. Put everything back together the way that you found it, including the washers, including the bearings. Make sure all your screws are tight. Any screws you don't want backing out on you, you can do a very small toothpick tipped size amount of Loctite on it to keep it from coming apart. And that is it. So if anybody has any questions, drop them in the comments. And Jonas and I appreciate all the support that you guys have given us during the Fuse project. Hope you guys have a great day.